Caleb Hunter thought he'd found his sanctuary when he bought that ramshackle shack for $12,000, a place where his 11-year-old son could grow up away from city violence. The townsfolk called him crazy, mocking his choice to move into what looked like a house of horrors sinking into the marshland. But when Grace Washington, the brilliant historian, arrived to map the area and discovered what lay buried beneath that ancient oak tree, everything changed. The rusted iron trapdoor they uncovered together held secrets worth $140 million, secrets that greedy developers would kill for. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning mist clung to the water like ghostly fingers when Caleb Hunter first laid eyes on what the real estate agent generously called a fixer-upper with potential. Standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders that had carried more than their share of burdens, the former Army sergeant stared at the tilting structure that would become his and Tyler's new home. The wooden shack leaned so far to the left it seemed to be bowing to the cypress trees surrounding it, and half the foundation had already surrendered to the hungry swamp beneath. "Dad, are you sure about this?" Tyler asked, his 11-year-old voice carrying the weight of uncertainty that had followed them from Detroit to this remote corner of Louisiana. His sandy hair caught the morning light as he peered through the broken windows at what would become their fresh start. Caleb placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the familiar ache in his chest that came whenever he wondered if he was making the right choices. "Sometimes the best treasures come disguised as disasters, buddy. We'll make this work." The real estate agent, a nervous man named Bobby Thibodeau, shifted uncomfortably in his too-tight suit as mosquitoes began their morning assault. "Now, I gotta be honest with y'all. Most folks think you'd have to be plumb crazy to want to live out here. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles through the bayou, and when the rains come heavy, this whole area floods something fierce." "Perfect," Caleb replied, counting out $12,000 in cash, the last of his military savings combined with the modest life insurance payout from Tyler's mother. "We're looking for peace and quiet." Bobby pocketed the money with visible relief, eager to escape the swamp and its clouds of insects. "Well, he's sure gonna get that. Ain't nobody gonna bother y'all way out here, that's for certain." As the agent's pickup truck disappeared down the muddy trail that barely qualified as a road, Caleb and Tyler stood alone with their new home and the enormous task ahead of them. The shack seemed to mock their optimism with every creak and groan as the wind pushed through its rotting boards. "First things first," Caleb announced, rolling up his sleeves to reveal arms marked by years of military service and honest labor. "We need to figure out which parts of this place are trying to kill us and which parts just look that way." Tyler giggled despite himself, the sound carrying hope across the still water. "I vote for fixing the porch first. It looks like it might collapse if a butterfly lands on it wrong." For the next 3 weeks, father and son worked from dawn until dusk, transforming the condemned structure into something resembling a livable home. Caleb's military engineering training proved invaluable as he reinforced the sagging foundation with concrete blocks and steel supports, while Tyler proved surprisingly handy with a paintbrush and an eye for making their humble dwelling feel welcoming. The townsfolk of nearby Cypress Bend watched their efforts with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. When Caleb made his weekly supply runs to Boudreaux's hardware store, the locals would gather around the counter like spectators at a particularly entertaining disaster. "Y'all hear about the crazy giant who bought the old Toussaint place?" Old Pete Boudreaux would announce to anyone within earshot. "Man must have lost his mind somewhere between here and wherever he came from." "Swamp fool," added Marie Landry, the town gossip whose knowledge of everyone's business was legendary. "That's what we ought to call him. Takes a special kind of fool to throw good money after bad like that." Caleb endured their laughter and whispered comments with the stoic patience he'd developed during his military service. He understood their skepticism, even found it somewhat justified. From the outside, his decision to buy a collapsing shack in the middle of nowhere with an 11-year-old son did appear to be the height of foolishness. But they didn't know about the nightmares that had plagued Tyler in Detroit, the way the sound of sirens and gunshots made the boy flinch and hide under his bed. They didn't understand the desperate need for a place where his son could sleep peacefully without fearing what tomorrow might bring. They couldn't see the way Tyler's eyes had lit up the first morning he'd awakened to the sound of birds instead of traffic, or how the boy's laugh had returned as he discovered tadpoles in the shallow water behind their home. "Let them talk," Caleb muttered to himself as he hauled another load of lumber back to their sanctuary. "They don't know what we're building here." As September faded into October, their hard work began to show real results. The porch no longer threatened imminent collapse. Fresh paint covered the worst of the weather damage, and new screens kept most of the mosquitoes at bay. Tyler had even started a small garden in the cleared space beside the house, carefully tending tomato plants and herbs that seemed to thrive in the rich swamp soil. The transformation hadn't gone unnoticed by everyone in the area. Dr. Grace Washington, a 32-year-old historian from Tulane University, had been contracted by the state to conduct a comprehensive survey of the region's historical significance before potential development began. Armed with ground-penetrating radar equipment and centuries of local records, she'd been systematically mapping every structure and landmark in the sprawling wetlands. Grace had heard the local gossip about the swamp fool during her evening meals at Boudreaux's diner, but she hadn't expected to find such a remarkable transformation when she finally reached the remote property. Emerging from the morning fog in her modified airboat, she stared in amazement at what had once been described to her as a total loss. "Excuse me," she called out as she secured her boat to the newly constructed dock. "I'm Dr. Washington from Tulane University. I'm conducting a historical survey of this area, and I was wondering if I might speak with you about your property." Caleb looked up from the roof beam he'd been adjusting, surprised to see another person so far from civilization. The woman standing on his dock was strikingly beautiful, with rich dark skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings. Her clothing was practical but well-made, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to working in challenging environments. "Tyler, come meet our visitor," Caleb called to his son, who emerged from the house wiping his hands on a dish towel. "I apologize for the intrusion," Grace continued, offering a warm smile to both father and son. "I had no idea anyone was actually living out here. The county records showed this property as abandoned." "Well, it was," Caleb replied, climbing down from his ladder with practiced ease. "But we're working on changing that. I'm Caleb Hunter, and this is my son Tyler." Grace shook hands with both of them, noting the firm grip and calloused palms that spoke of honest labor. "The transformation you've accomplished here is remarkable. How long have you been working on it?" "About 2 months now," Tyler answered proudly. "Dad says we're building something special." "Your father is absolutely right," Grace replied, genuinely impressed by what she saw. "May I ask what drew you to this particular location? It's quite isolated." Caleb's expression grew thoughtful as he considered how to explain their journey without revealing too much of their painful past. Sometimes a man needs to find a place where he and his son can build something from the ground up, away from the noise and complications of the world. "This place called to us." Something in his tone told Grace there was much more to their story, but she respected the boundaries he'd drawn around their privacy. "I understand completely. There's something powerful about creating your own sanctuary." Over the next hour, Grace explained her mission to document the historical significance of the region. She showed them maps dating back to the 1800s, pointing out structures and landmarks that had vanished into the swamp over the decades. "Your property sits on particularly interesting ground," she explained, spreading a hand-drawn survey map across their kitchen table. "According to these records from 1865, there was once a substantial plantation house somewhere in this vicinity, along with several outbuildings, and one appears to have been a significant dock complex." Tyler leaned over the map with fascination. "What happened to it all?" "Time and weather," Grace replied. "The Great Hurricane of 1893 destroyed most of the structures in this area, and the swamp gradually reclaimed what was left. But sometimes foundations and artifacts survive underground, especially if they were built to last." Caleb studied the map with growing interest. "You think there might be historical artifacts buried on our land?" "It's certainly possible. That's part of what I'm here to investigate. Would you mind if I conducted some non-invasive surveys? I have ground-penetrating radar equipment that can identify subsurface anomalies without disturbing your property." The request seemed harmless enough, and Caleb found himself curious about what secrets their land might hold. "I don't see why not, as long as you don't mind working around our construction projects." Grace smiled with obvious relief and excitement. "Thank you so much. I promise to stay out of your way." Over the following days, Grace became a regular presence around their property, methodically scanning the ground with her sophisticated equipment, while Caleb and Tyler continued their renovation work. She proved to be excellent company, sharing fascinating stories about the region's history, while helping with small tasks that didn't require specialized skills. Tyler was particularly drawn to Grace's stories about the Civil War era, when the Louisiana bayous had served as hideouts for both Confederate deserters and Union sympathizers. She told him about secret routes through the swamplands, hidden caches of supplies, and desperate men who'd vanished into the wilderness rather than face the violence of a nation at war with itself. Some of those men never came back, Grace explained as they worked together to clear debris from around the massive oak tree that dominated their backyard. They just disappeared into the bayou with whatever they could carry, leaving behind families who never learned their fate. "That's so Tyler replied, carefully stacking broken branches. "Do you think any of them survived out here?" "Some certainly did," Grace answered. "There are records of small settlements deep in the wetlands, places where men built new lives far from the reach of armies and governments. A few of those communities lasted well into the 1900s. As Grace continued her surveys, her equipment began detecting increasingly interesting anomalies beneath the ancient oak tree. The readings suggested a large metal object buried approximately 8 feet underground, something too regular in shape to be natural debris. "Caleb, you might want to see this," she called out on a humid Thursday morning, her voice containing barely contained excitement. He walked over to where she knelt beside her radar display. Tyler, close behind, with his usual curiosity. The screen showed a clear rectangular outline beneath the gnarled roots of the oak tree. "What do you think it is?" Caleb asked, studying the anomalous reading. "I'm not certain, but the size and shape suggest it could be a vault or storage chamber of some kind. The metal content is significant, which suggests it was built to protect whatever's inside from moisture and decay." Tyler's eyes widened with possibility. "Like a treasure chest?" Grace laughed at his enthusiasm, but didn't dismiss the idea entirely. "Well, people did hide valuable things during the Civil War. The question is whether we should investigate further or simply document the finding for future archaeological study." Caleb found himself torn between caution and curiosity. The responsible course would be to report the discovery and let professional archaeologists handle any excavation. But something about the mystery beneath their oak tree called to him with the same voice that had drawn him to this remote sanctuary in the first place. "What would it take to find out what's down there?" he asked. Grace hesitated, clearly weighing professional protocols against personal fascination. "Well, technically, as the property owner, you have the right to excavate on your own land, and I am a qualified archaeologist. If we were careful and documented everything properly." "Dad, can we?" Tyler asked, practically vibrating with excitement. "Can we dig it up?" The decision, when it came, felt inevitable. They would carefully excavate the mysterious object, following proper archaeological procedures to preserve whatever they might find. Grace would document the entire process, ensuring that any historical significance would be properly recorded. They began the next morning, working in careful layers to avoid damaging whatever lay beneath the oak's massive root system. The soil was rich and dark, heavy with centuries of decomposed organic matter that had to be removed one shovelful at a time. By the afternoon of the second day, Caleb's shovel struck something solid with a distinctive metallic ring. Tyler cheered with excitement while Grace carefully brushed away the remaining dirt to reveal the corner of what appeared to be a large iron door or hatch. "It's definitely man-made," Grace confirmed, her professional excitement barely contained. "And the ironwork is consistent with mid-19th century construction techniques." Working together, they gradually cleared away enough soil to reveal the entire structure. A rectangular iron trapdoor, approximately 4 feet by 6 feet, secured with a heavy lock that had long since corroded into uselessness. The metal surface was pitted with rust, but had clearly been built to withstand Estes. Decades of burial. Ah, should we open it? Tyler asked, his voice hushed with anticipation. Grace looked at Caleb, recognizing that this was his decision to make. Whatever's down there has been waiting for over 150 years. A few more minutes won't hurt. With Tyler holding a flashlight and Grace preparing her camera to document their discovery, Caleb gripped the corroded handle of the trapdoor and pulled. The hinges protested with a shriek of tortured metal. But the door swung open to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. The air that rose from the underground chamber was stale but surprisingly dry, suggesting that the vault had been well sealed against moisture. Grace's flashlight beam revealed stone walls and what appeared to be wooden shelving along the sides of the chamber. "I should go down first," Caleb said, his military training automatically assessing potential dangers. "Make sure it's safe." The ladder was solid despite its age, and Caleb descended carefully into the underground room. What he found there would change their lives forever. The vault was larger than he'd expected. Perhaps 12 feet square with a ceiling high enough for him to stand upright. Along the walls, wooden shelves held an assortment of items that had survived their long burial remarkably well. But it was the contents of the chamber that took his breath away. Stacked neatly in the center of the room were dozens of gold bars, each one roughly the size of a brick and bearing the distinctive markings of Confederate gold reserves. Beside them sat wooden crates filled with silver coins, jewelry, and other precious items that gleamed in his flashlight beam, despite their age. "Caleb, are you all right down there?" Grace called from above, her voice tight with concern at his prolonged silence. "I'm fine," he managed to reply, though his voice sounded strange even to his own ears. "Grace, you need to see this. Both of you need to see this." One by one, they descended into the vault that would transform their understanding of what was possible in their lives. Tyler's gasp of amazement echoed off the stone walls as Grace's flashlight illuminated the treasure that had waited so patiently for their discovery. "My God," Grace whispered, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. "This is incredible. This is a Confederate treasury cache, probably hidden during the final days of the war." She moved carefully among the stacked gold bars, her trained eye cataloging the historical significance of what they'd uncovered. These markings indicate this gold came from the Richmond reserves. When the Confederate government collapsed in 1865, vast amounts of gold and silver simply vanished. Historians have been searching for these lost treasures for generations. Tyler picked up one of the gold bars, surprised by its weight. "How much do you think it's worth?" Grace's mind raced through calculations based on current gold prices and the historical value of Confederate artifacts. "Based on what I can see here, conservatively, we're looking at somewhere between $100 million and $150 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence, too large and impossible to fully comprehend. Caleb sank onto one of the wooden crates, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their discovery. "What do we do now?" he asked, looking to Grace for guidance he desperately needed. "Well, legally, as the property owner, this belongs to you," Grace replied slowly, her mind working through the complex implications. "But something this significant will attract attention from historians, treasure hunters, government agencies, and unfortunately, people with less honorable intentions." Tyler, still clutching his gold bar, looked between the two adults with growing understanding. "You mean bad people might try to take it away from us?" Grace nodded gravely. "Discoveries like this have a way of bringing out both the best and worst in people. We need to be very careful about how we proceed." Over the next several hours, they carefully documented the contents of the vault, with Grace photographing and cataloging each item, while Caleb and Tyler moved the treasure to a more secure location within their home. The gold bars alone numbered 47 pieces, each one worth approximately $60,000 at current market prices. In addition to the gold, they found silver coins dating from the 1840s through 1865, jewelry that had obviously belonged to wealthy plantation families, and several crates of antique weapons including pistols, rifles, and swords that would be worth fortunes to collectors. But perhaps most intriguingly, they discovered a leather-bound journal wrapped in oiled cloth that had preserved it perfectly. The journal, written in a careful hand, told the story of Colonel Marcus Beauregard, a Confederate officer who had been tasked with hiding the Treasury reserves as Union forces closed in on Richmond. "Listen to this," Grace read aloud from the journal as they sat around their kitchen table that evening. "April 10th, 1865. The cause is lost. But the gold must not fall into Yankee hands. I have selected a location deep in the Louisiana marshlands where it can wait for better days. May God preserve what we have hidden for future generations who might have need of it." Tyler leaned forward with fascination. "He buried it specifically for people like us to find?" "It appears so," Grace replied, turning the pages with careful reverence. "Colonel Beauregard and his men built this vault as a time capsule, hoping that someday the treasure would be discovered by people who could put it to good use." Caleb felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders, like a familiar burden. The colonel trusted that whoever found this would be worthy of it. As word of their discovery inevitably began to spread through the small network of people who knew about Grace's research, they found themselves facing exactly the kind of attention she had warned them about. Within a week, their phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, treasure hunters, and representatives of various organizations claiming legal rights to the find. More concerning were the visitors who began appearing at their remote property uninvited. Men in expensive suits who claimed to represent interested parties willing to make generous offers for the treasure. Others who were less subtle about their intentions, driving slowly past their home and making notes about their security arrangements. "We need help," Caleb told Grace during one of their evening strategy sessions. "This is getting dangerous, and I won't put Tyler at risk." Grace had been thinking along the same lines. Through her academic connections, she had contacted a lawyer who specialized in treasure recovery rights and a security consultant who had experience protecting valuable discoveries. "The legal situation is actually quite clear," explained Jonathan Hayes, the lawyer Grace had recommended. "As the property owner who discovered the treasure through legitimate means, you have clear title to everything you found. The challenge is protecting your rights and your safety while we establish proper procedures for costs, authentication, and sale." The security consultant, a former FBI agent named Sarah Chen, was more direct about the dangers they faced. "Mr. Hunter, discoveries of this magnitude attract serious criminal attention. We're not just talking about opportunistic thieves. We're talking about organized groups who view $140 million as worth considerable risk and violence." End quote. "What do you recommend?" Caleb asked, his protective instincts fully activated. "Short term, we establish a security perimeter around your property and arrange for professional protection. Long term, we need to get the majority of this treasure into secure storage while we work through the legal processes for authentication and sale." End quote. Tyler had been listening quietly to the adult conversations about their dramatically changed circumstances. That evening, as Caleb tucked him into bed, the boy asked the question that had been troubling him. "Dad, are we going to have to leave our home?" Caleb sat on the edge of Tyler's bed, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know yet, buddy. A lot of things are going to change because of what we found. But I promise you this, whatever happens, we're going to face it together, and we're going to make sure you're safe." "I like it here," Tyler said, quietly. "I like our house, and I like Grace, and I don't want to go back to the city." "I like it here too," Caleb replied, meaning every word. "And we're going to do everything we can to protect what we've built." The next morning brought their first real test of the security measures Sarah Chen had recommended. A convoy of black SUVs appeared on their property, disgorging a group of men who claimed to represent a development consortium interested in purchasing their land. "Mr. Hunter," announced their leader, a well-dressed man with cold eyes and an artificial smile. "I'm Richard Kellerman from Apex Development Group. We understand you've made some interesting discoveries on your property." "I'm not interested in selling," Caleb replied firmly, grateful for the presence of two security guards who had taken positions nearby. "Oh, I think you misunderstand," Kellerman continued, his smile never wavering. "This isn't really a negotiation. You see, we have investors who are very committed to this project, and they don't typically accept no for an answer." The threat was clear, and Caleb felt his military training kicking in as he assessed the tactical situation. "I think you should leave now." "We'll be back," Kellerman promised as his group returned to their vehicles. "And next time, we might not be so polite." That evening, Grace arrived for dinner, visibly shaken by her own encounter with unwelcome visitors. "They came to my hotel room," she told Caleb and Tyler, as Sarah Chen took notes. "Three men claiming to be federal agents, asking questions about our discovery, and suggesting that I might be violating federal antiquities laws by not reporting it immediately. Were they actually federal agents?" Sarah asked. "I don't think so. Their credentials looked fake, and real federal agents don't typically make house calls to hotel rooms without proper procedures." Sarah nodded grimly. "This is escalating faster than I'd hoped. We need to accelerate our timeline for securing the treasure and establishing your legal protections." Over the next week, they worked around the clock to photograph, catalog, and securely transport the majority of the Confederate treasure to a vault in New Orleans, while maintaining the appearance that everything remained Asana, hidden on their property. It was a complex operation that required careful coordination and more than a little deception. Grace proved invaluable during this process, using her academic credentials to arrange proper storage and authentication procedures, while maintaining the confidentiality necessary to protect Caleb and Brained. Tyler. Her feelings for the giant single father had evolved far beyond professional interest, though she was careful not to complicate an already complex situation with personal emotions. "You know," she said to Caleb during one of their late-night planning sessions, "when I first came out here to do a routine survey, I never imagined I'd find myself in the middle of a real-life treasure hunt. Is that what this is?" Caleb replied, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Because it feels more like a war." "Maybe it's both," Grace suggested. "Maybe the best treasures are always worth fighting for." The comment hung between them, laden with meanings that neither was quite ready to address directly. But Tyler, who had been pretending to sleep while listening to their conversation, smiled in the darkness of his bedroom. Even at 11, he could see what the adults were too cautious to acknowledge. Their defensive preparations proved wise when Kellerman's group returned, this time with additional personnel and less pretense of civility. They arrived at dawn, surrounding the property with armed men, while Kellerman himself approached the house with an air of confident authority. "Mr. Hunter," he called out, "we need to discuss your situation rationally. You're a single father with a young son, living in a very isolated location. Accidents happen out here, and it would be unfortunate if something were to happen to either of you." Caleb appeared on his reinforced porch, flanked by two professional security guards, and with Tyler safely inside the house. "I told you before, we're not interested in selling. The treasure belongs to us," Kellerman declared, abandoning all pretense. "Our research led us to this location, and we have significant investments in this project. You're nothing but a squatter who got lucky." "Actually," Grace announced, emerging from the house with a thick folder of documents, "Mr. Hunter is the legal property owner, and everything found on his land belongs to him under both state and federal law. I have the documentation right here." Kellerman's expression grew dangerous. "Dr. Washington, isn't it? You're making a serious mistake getting involved in this situation. The only mistake being made here is your assumption that you can intimidate honest people into giving up what rightfully belongs to them," Grace replied with steel in her voice. The standoff might have escalated into violence, but Sarah Chen had anticipated this possibility. At her signal, additional security personnel emerged from concealed positions around the property, while a helicopter appeared overhead, clearly visible and obviously recording the entire confrontation. "Gentlemen," Sarah announced through a bullhorn, "you are trespassing on private property and making threatening statements that are being recorded for evidence. I suggest you leave immediately before this becomes a matter for law enforcement." Kellerman retreated with his men, but not before making one final threat. "This isn't over. Nobody finds $140 million and just walks away with it." As the convoy of black SUVs disappeared down their muddy access road, Caleb gathered Tyler and Grace close, feeling the weight of protecting both his son and the woman who had become so important to their lives. "Are we safe now?" Tyler asked, his young voice carrying the kind of worry no child should have to bear. "We're getting there," Caleb replied, though he knew their troubles were far from over. The legal battles that followed stretched across several months, with multiple parties claiming various rights to the Confederate treasure. Kellerman's development group filed lawsuits claiming prior discovery rights, while several government agencies investigated potential federal claims to the artifacts. Throughout it all, Grace stood by Caleb and Tyler, using her professional expertise and personal courage to defend their rights to the discovery. Her academic credentials proved crucial in establishing the proper procedures for authentication and legal ownership. "You know," she told Caleb during one of their countless meetings with lawyers and officials, "I came here to write a paper about forgotten Civil War sites. I never expected to find a family worth fighting for." The comment was as close as either of them had come to acknowledging the deep feelings that had developed between them during their shared adventure. Tyler, who had been hoping for exactly this development, immediately seized the opportunity. "Does this mean Grace is going to stay with us?" he asked with the directness that only children can manage. Grace and Caleb exchanged looks that communicated volumes, and for the first time in months, both of them smiled with genuine happiness rather than defensive determination. "I think," Grace said carefully, "that depends on whether your father would like me to stay." "More than anything," Caleb replied, finally allowing himself to express feelings he'd been protecting since their first meeting. The final resolution of their legal challenges came nearly 6 months after their initial discovery. Jonathan Hayes had successfully defended their ownership rights against all challengers, while Sarah Chen's security measures had prevented any attempts at theft or intimidation. The authenticated Confederate treasure sold at auction for $138 million, making Caleb and Tyler instantly wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. But perhaps more importantly, they had gained something even more valuable: a complete family. Grace moved permanently to their restored home in the swamp, bringing her books and research equipment to the place that had become their shared sanctuary. She continued her historical research while helping Caleb manage their newfound wealth, and Tyler adjust to the dramatic changes in their circumstances. "You know what the best part is?" Tyler announced during their first family dinner, after all the legal issues had been resolved. "We didn't have to leave home to find our treasure. We found it right here." Caleb looked around their dining room, with its mismatched furniture and windows that looked out over the peaceful swamp, and realized his son was absolutely right. The real treasure hadn't been the gold bars hidden beneath the oak tree. It had been the home they'd built together, the woman who had chosen to share their lives, and the peace they'd found in their unlikely sanctuary. "Colonel Beauregard would be proud," Grace said, raising her glass of sweet tea and a toast. "He hid his treasure for people who would use it to build something worthwhile." "To the Colonel," Caleb replied, "and to finding what you need when you need it most." Outside their windows, the Louisiana swamp continued its eternal rhythms, unchanged by human dreams and discoveries. But inside their home, 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds celebrated the greatest treasure of all: a family forged by courage, protected by love, and blessed by the kind of luck that comes to those brave enough to build their dreams in the most unlikely places. The townsfolk of Cypress Bend never again called Caleb Hunter the swamp fool. Instead, they spoke of him with the respect due to a man who had proven that sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in following your heart to places others fear to go. His story became local legend, passed down through generations as proof that the most extraordinary treasures often wait in the most ordinary places, hidden beneath the surface of what appears to be nothing more than another man's abandoned dream. But their story was far from over. The wealth from the Confederate treasure opened doors they had never imagined, but it also brought challenges that tested every lesson they had learned about trust, family, and protecting what truly mattered. Within weeks of the auction, Caleb found himself overwhelmed by financial advisors, investment opportunities, and people claiming to be long-lost relatives suddenly interested in reconnecting. The simple life he had sought in the swamp became complicated by the very success of their discovery. "Dad, there's a man at the door who says he's your cousin from Texas," Tyler announced one morning, his voice carrying the wariness that had become second nature since their discovery became public knowledge. Caleb sighed, recognizing another opportunist drawn by their newfound wealth. "I don't have any cousins in Texas, buddy. Tell him I'm not available." Grace looked up from her laptop where she had been researching educational opportunities for Tyler. We need to make some decisions about how we want to handle this attention. It's only going to get worse as time goes on. The pressure intensified when news outlets picked up their story, turning their quiet treasure discovery into a media sensation. "Swamp hermit strikes it rich," screamed one headline, while another proclaimed, "Single dad's $138 million gamble pays off." The attention brought tourists, curiosity seekers, and unfortunately, criminals to their remote corner of Louisiana. "We can't keep living like this," Grace said after their third break-in attempt in as many weeks. "Tyler can't grow up surrounded by security guards and surveillance cameras." Caleb knew she was right, but the thought of leaving their hard-won sanctuary felt like admitting defeat. "This is our home. We built something here. Maybe we build something strong enough to carry with us," Grace suggested gently. "Home isn't just a place, it's the people you share it with." Tyler, who had been listening from the kitchen while pretending to do homework, finally joined their conversation. "What if we built another home somewhere else, but kept this one too? Like a vacation house?" The simplicity of his solution struck them both. With their resources, they could afford multiple properties, giving them options and security while preserving their connection to the place where they had found each other. Over the following months, they carefully selected a primary residence in a gated community outside New Orleans, close enough to Grace's university for her continued research, but secure enough to provide Tyler with a normal childhood. The house was beautiful, but not ostentatious, large enough for their needs but not so grand as to attract unwanted attention. However, they kept their swamp property as a weekend retreat, a place where they could return to remember their roots and the simple life that had brought them together. Caleb continued to maintain and improve the original shack, now more as a labor of love than necessity. Tyler thrived in his new environment, attending a private school where his intelligence and curiosity were properly challenged, while his newfound wealth remained largely private. He made friends easily, though he was careful about revealing too much about his family's circumstances. "I told Marcus that we found some old stuff in our backyard that was worth money," Tyler explained to his parents, after a particularly probing conversation with a classmate. "I didn't mention the exact amount." "That's smart," Grace replied, proud of how mature he had become through their ordeal. "It's important to be honest with friends, but some information is private." Caleb struggled more with the adjustment to wealth than his son did. Having grown up with very little and spent his adult life earning every dollar through hard work, the sudden abundance felt surreal and sometimes overwhelming. "I keep expecting someone to tell me it was all a mistake," he confided to Grace during one of their evening walks through their new neighborhood. "Like maybe we're just borrowing this life until the real owners come back." "You earned this," Grace reminded him firmly. "You took a risk when you bought that property. You worked incredibly hard to make it livable, and you protected your discovery with courage and integrity. This isn't charity or luck, it's the result of your choices." Her words helped, but Caleb found his true peace in the charitable foundation they established 6 months after settling their legal affairs. The Hunter Family Foundation focused on helping single parents, veterans, and families in crisis, providing both financial assistance and practical support for people trying to rebuild their lives. "This feels right," Caleb said as he reviewed grant applications from families across Louisiana. "This feels like what the Colonel would have wanted." Their first major project was renovating and expanding the community center in Cypress Bend, the same town where he had once been mocked as the swamp fool. The irony wasn't lost on him, as former skeptics like Pete Boudreau and Marie Landry now treated him with respect bordering on reverence. "You know, Caleb," Pete said during the dedication ceremony for the new community center, "I owe you an apology. We all thought you were crazy for buying that old place, but you saw something the rest of us missed." "Sometimes crazy is just another word for hopeful," Caleb replied, meaning every word. Grace's career also flourished in ways she had never anticipated. Her documentation of the Confederate treasure discovery led to academic opportunities, book deals, and consulting work that established her as one of the foremost experts on Civil War-era artifacts and archaeological recovery. "I'm writing about us," she told Caleb and Tyler during dinner one evening. "The publisher wants me to tell the whole story. From the historical survey to the treasure discovery to what we've done with the money. Are you going to tell them about the part where Dad couldn't figure out how to ask you on a date? Tyler asked with a grin. Grace laughed while Caleb pretended to be offended. That's definitely going in the book. Along with the part where a certain 11-year-old played matchmaker. Someone had to, Tyler replied with satisfaction. You adults were taking forever. Their happiness wasn't without its shadows. Kellerman and his associates had disappeared after their legal defeat, but rumors persisted of other groups still interested in the Hunter family's wealth. Sarah Chen maintained a discreet security presence around their various properties, and they all remained vigilant about their personal safety. The most serious threat came not from criminals, but from Tyler's biological extended family. His maternal grandparents, who had shown no interest in their grandson when he was the son of a struggling single father, suddenly filed for custody rights when his circumstances changed dramatically. They want to provide Tyler with the cultural and educational advantages that his current situation cannot offer. Jonathan Hayes read from their legal filing with obvious disgust. It's a transparent attempt to gain access to his inheritance. The custody battle consumed months of their lives and thousands of dollars in legal fees. Tyler's grandparents painted Caleb as an unfit parent who had stumbled into wealth through luck rather than merit, while questioning Grace's influence on their family dynamic. They're saying I'm not Tyler's real family, Grace told Caleb, after a particularly brutal day of depositions. They're claiming I'm just a gold digger who manipulated both of you. That's ridiculous, Tyler declared with the fierce loyalty that had become his trademark. Grace has been more of a mom to me than anyone ever was. And Dad earned this money by being brave enough to take a chance when everyone else said he was crazy. The boy's testimony during the custody hearings proved pivotal. Speaking with maturity far beyond his years, Tyler eloquently described the life his father had built for them, the security and love Grace had provided, and his own wishes for his future. My dad saved us both when he bought that house in the swamp, Tyler told the judge. He gave us a place where we could be safe and happy. Grace gave us a family. I don't want to live with people who only care about me now that we have money. The judge ruled decisively in their favor, but the experience left all three of them emotionally drained and more protective of their privacy than ever. Maybe we should consider making it official, Caleb said to Grace one evening as they watched Tyler play in their backyard with friends from school. Marriage, I mean. It would provide additional legal protections, and honestly, we're already a family in every way that matters. Grace's smile lit up her entire face. Caleb Hunter, is that your idea of a romantic proposal? Would you prefer something more elaborate? He asked, suddenly uncertain. I'd prefer honesty, she replied, taking his hands in hers. And honesty is what you've given me from the day we met. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you, because that's what I'm really saying yes to. This whole beautiful, complicated family we've built together. They married 6 months later in a simple ceremony on their swamp property, surrounded by the cypresses and Spanish moss that had witnessed their first meeting. Tyler served as best man, beaming with pride as he watched his father and Grace exchange vows under the ancient oak tree that had changed all their lives. I promise to protect this family and the home we've built together, Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise to be worthy of the treasure we found, both the gold and each other. I promise to stand with you through whatever adventures life brings us, Grace replied. And I promise to help Tyler grow up knowing that the greatest riches come from courage, kindness, and the willingness to take chances on love. Pastor Williams from Cypress Bend, the same man who had officiated at Tyler's mother's funeral years earlier, pronounced them husband and wife as the Louisiana sun set through the trees. It was, Tyler declared, the perfect ending to their treasure hunt. But life rarely provides perfect endings, only new beginnings. As the Hunter family settled into their married life, new challenges and opportunities continued to arise. Grace's book about their discovery became a bestseller, bringing renewed media attention and fresh opportunities for both good and trouble. A Hollywood production company offered them millions for the movie rights to their story, leading to months of negotiations about how their lives would be portrayed. Tyler was particularly excited about the possibility of seeing their adventure on the big screen, though he had strong opinions about which actors should play his family members. They want to cast someone way too young to play Dad, he complained after reviewing the casting suggestions. And they're making Grace too glamorous. She's beautiful, but she's also tough and smart. They need to show that. The foundation work continued to expand, with projects across the Gulf Coast region. They funded scholarship programs for children of single parents, provided grants for small businesses in rural communities, and supported veterans organizations helping former service members transition to civilian life. One of their most meaningful projects was the restoration of historic sites throughout Louisiana, working with the State Historical Society to preserve locations that might otherwise be lost to development or, quote, decay. Grace's expertise proved invaluable in these efforts, and she found deep satisfaction in ensuring that future generations would have access to their heritage. "We're treasure hunters," she explained to a group of students during a lecture at Tulane University. But the treasures we're protecting aren't always gold and silver. Sometimes, the most valuable discoveries are the stories of people who came before us, the lessons they learned, and the courage they showed in building better lives for their families. Tyler continued to excel academically, showing particular aptitude for history and archaeology that delighted Grace. During summer breaks, he often accompanied her on research expeditions, learning field techniques and developing his own appreciation for the detective work involved in uncovering the past. "Do you think we'll ever find another treasure like the Confederate gold?" he asked during one of their weekend visits to the swamp house. "I think we find treasures all the time," Grace replied, watching Caleb repair a section of the dock they had built years earlier. "We just have to learn to recognize them." As Tyler entered his teenage years, the family faced new dynamics and challenges. His friends knew he was wealthy, but he worked hard to maintain normal relationships and avoid the entitled behavior that sometimes accompanied sudden wealth. Caleb and Grace were careful to ensure he understood the value of money, while also appreciating the opportunities it provided. "Money is a tool," Caleb explained during one of their regular father-son talks. "It can build things or destroy them, depending on how you use it. What matters is remembering what's truly valuable and making sure money serves those things, rather than replacing them." The lesson was tested when Tyler expressed interest in an expensive summer program at an archaeological dig in Egypt. The cost was insignificant given their resources, but Caleb insisted that Tyler earn half the money through work with the foundation, understanding the value of the opportunity through his own contribution. "This is harder than finding buried treasure," Tyler complained after spending a week helping organize grant applications and donor communications. "Good work usually is," Grace replied with a smile. "But the things you earn yourself are always more meaningful than the things that are simply given to you." Their peaceful life was disrupted once again when construction crews working on a highway expansion project near their original property uncovered additional artifacts that appeared to be connected to their Confederate treasure discovery. The State Archaeological Commission contacted Grace immediately, asking for her expertise in evaluating the new find. "It looks like Colonel Beauregard had more than one hiding place," she told Caleb and Tyler after returning from her initial survey of the construction site. "We found what appears to be a weapons cache, and possibly documents that could provide more information about the Confederate Treasury operation." The discovery reopened old wounds and attracted new attention from treasure hunters and criminal organizations. Kellerman's name surfaced again in connection with suspicious individuals, asking questions around Cypress Bend, forcing them to increase security measures and reconsider their routine visits to the swamp house. "I'm not going to let fear drive us away from our home again," Caleb declared during a family meeting about their safety protocols. "But we're going to be smart about how we protect ourselves." Sarah Chen recommended additional security measures, including upgraded surveillance systems and a more robust personal protection detail. The measures were expensive and intrusive, but they provided peace of mind that allowed the family to continue their normal activities. The new archaeological site proved to contain significant historical value, including documents that provided details about the final days of the Confederate government and the desperate attempts to preserve resources for post-war reconstruction. Grace led the excavation team, working with state and federal authorities to ensure proper preservation and study of the artifacts. Tyler spent part of his summer vacation working at the dig site, learning advanced archaeological techniques while contributing to a discovery that would enhance understanding of a crucial period in American history. His enthusiasm and natural aptitude impressed the professional archaeologists, several of whom suggested he consider pursuing the field as a career. "You have the instincts for this work," Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the lead federal archaeologist, told Tyler during their final week at the site. "More importantly, you understand that archaeology isn't about finding treasure, it's about finding truth." The comment sparked a thoughtful conversation between Tyler and his parents about his future goals and interests. As he approached his senior year of high school, decisions about college and career paths became increasingly important. "I want to do something that matters," Tyler told them during one of their evening discussions. "Something that helps people and makes the world better, the way our foundation work does. Then you'll find your path," Grace assured him. "The specific career isn't as important as the values you bring to whatever you choose to do." As Tyler prepared for college applications, the family reflected on how far they had traveled from that morning when Caleb had first laid eyes on a collapsing shack in the Louisiana swamp. The scared single father and traumatized boy who had sought refuge in the wilderness had become confident, successful people, contributing meaningfully to their community and the world. "Do you ever regret it?" Grace asked Caleb during one of their quiet moments together. "Buying that crazy house and changing all our lives?" Caleb looked around their New Orleans home, filled with the sounds of Tyler practicing piano and the comfortable chaos of a happy family, then thought about their weekend retreats to the swamp where they had found each other and their craft. "Fortune? Never," he replied without hesitation. "Every single choice led us here, to this family, to this life. Even the scary parts were worth it." Their story had become legend throughout Louisiana, inspiring other people to take chances on their dreams and believe in the possibility of extraordinary outcomes from ordinary courage. The Hunter Family Foundation received hundreds of letters from people sharing their own stories of taking risks, starting over, and building better lives for their families. "We become accidentally inspirational," Grace observed with amusement as she read through a stack of thank you letters from foundation grant recipients. "Maybe that's the real treasure," Tyler suggested, now 17 and preparing for graduation. "Not the gold we found, but the hope we've given other people that their lives can change too." The observation showed the wisdom he had gained through their extraordinary journey. From a frightened 11-year-old hiding from sirens in Detroit to a confident young man preparing for college, Tyler had learned lessons about courage, family, and responsibility that would serve him well, regardless of what path his life would take. As graduation approached, the family began planning their next chapter. Tyler had been accepted to several prestigious universities, with plans to study history and archaeology while maintaining his involvement with the foundation. Grace had been offered a department chair position at Tulane that would allow her to expand her research while staying close to home. Caleb looked forward to increasing his hands-on involvement with the foundation, while possibly writing his own book about their experience. On the anniversary of their treasure discovery, they returned to the swamp house for their traditional celebration dinner. The property had been beautifully maintained and expanded over the years, but the original shack remained at its heart, a reminder of where their journey had begun. "5 years ago, we were 3 separate people looking for something we couldn't quite name," Grace said as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold. "Now we're a family with more blessings than we ever dreamed possible. And it all started because Dad was brave enough to buy a house that everyone said was impossible to fix," Tyler added, raising his glass of sweet tea in a toast. "To impossible dreams," Caleb replied, "and the courage to make them real." As the evening stars appeared in the darkening sky, the ancient oak tree stood sentinel over their celebration, its roots still protecting the empty vault that had once held Confederate gold, but had given them something far more valuable: each other. Tyler's acceptance to Harvard University with a full academic scholarship brought both pride and bittersweet emotions to the Hunter family. While his intelligence and achievements had earned him this opportunity independent of their wealth, the prospect of their tight-knit family unit changing felt monumental. "I could defer for a year," Tyler suggested during one of their planning discussions. "Help with the foundation expansion we've been talking about." "Absolutely not," Grace replied firmly. This is your time to explore the world and discover who you want to become. The foundation will be here when you're ready. Caleb nodded in agreement, though the thought of Tyler being so far away brought back memories of all the dangers they had faced together. Your mom's right. Besides, Harvard has one of the best archaeology programs in the country. Dr. Martinez specifically recommended their field study opportunities. As Tyler's departure approached, the family decided to embark on one final summer adventure together. Using their resources and Grace's academic connections, they arranged a month-long archaeological expedition to Peru, where Tyler could gain hands-on experience at Machu Picchu while the family spent quality time together before he left for college. The expedition proved transformative for all of them. Working alongside international teams of archaeologists, Tyler demonstrated natural leadership abilities and an intuitive understanding of field methodology that impressed the senior researchers. Grace found herself energized by the collaborative environment and began developing ideas for her next book about comparative archaeological techniques across different cultures. Caleb, meanwhile, discovered an unexpected passion for the organizational and logistical aspects of archaeological work. His military background and problem-solving skills proved invaluable in coordinating supplies, managing personnel, and ensuring site security in the challenging mountain environment. You know, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition leader, told Grace during their final week, your husband has a real gift for expedition management. Had you ever considered formal archaeological training? For him? The suggestion sparked conversations that continued long after their return to Louisiana. Caleb had always been intelligent and capable, but his lack of formal education beyond high school had limited his career options before their discovery changed everything. Now, with time and resources available, he began considering the possibility of pursuing his own academic interests. I'm 42 years old, he told Grace one evening as they reviewed university catalogs. Isn't it a little late to be thinking about college? It's never too late to become who you're meant to be, she replied, echoing words he had spoken to her years earlier when she had doubted her own abilities. Besides, you bring life experience that most traditional students lack. Tyler was thrilled by the possibility of his father joining him in academic pursuits, even suggesting that Caleb consider Tulane University's graduate program in historical preservation, which would allow him to stay close to home while pursuing meaningful studies. We could be study partners, Tyler joked, though you'd probably be better at the organizational stuff than I am. The decision was made easier when Tulane offered Caleb a place in their graduate program with full credit for his military experience and practical knowledge gained through the foundation work. At 43, he would become a graduate student studying historical preservation with a focus on community-based conservation projects. Meanwhile, the Hunter Family Foundation continued to expand its reach and impact. What had begun as a simple desire to help other single parents had evolved into a comprehensive organization addressing educational inequality, historical preservation, veteran support, and rural community development across the Gulf Coast region. The Foundation's most ambitious project came when the state of Louisiana approached them about partnering in the restoration of several historic plantation sites that had fallen into disrepair. The project would cost millions of dollars, but would preserve crucial pieces of American history while providing educational and economic opportunities for local communities. This is exactly what Colonel Beauregard would have wanted, Grace said as they toured the first site, a crumbling antebellum mansion surrounded by overgrown grounds that had once been home to hundreds of enslaved people. Preserving history, so future generations can learn from both the achievements and the mistakes of the past. The Plantation Restoration Project became a model for responsible historical preservation, acknowledging the full complexity of these sites' histories rather than romanticizing the antebellum period. Working with historians, community leaders, and descendant communities, they created educational programs that told the complete story of slavery, resistance, survival, and eventual freedom. Tyler spent his final summer before college working on the Plantation Project, helping to develop interpretive materials for young visitors. His work on a multimedia presentation about the daily lives of enslaved children earned recognition from the National Park Service and reinforced his commitment to using historical education as a tool for Beecher. Social justice. History isn't just about what happened, he explained to a group of middle school students during one of his presentations. It's about understanding how what happened affects what's happening now, and how we can make better choices for the future. As September approached, and Tyler's departure for Harvard drew near, the family spent increasing amounts of time at their swamp retreat, wanting to store up memories of their time together in the place where their lives had changed forever. The property had evolved considerably over the years. The original shack remained as the heart of the complex, but they had added a modern kitchen, additional bedrooms for guests, and a large screened porch that looked out over the water. The dock had been expanded to accommodate larger boats, and walking trails wound through the surrounding wetlands, allowing them to explore their domain without disturbing the wildlife that had always been their neighbors. "I'm going to miss this place," Tyler said one evening as they sat on the porch listening to the night sounds of the swamp. "College is going to be exciting, but it won't have any alligators or cypress trees. The swamp will be here when you come back," Caleb assured him. "And we'll be here too, whenever you need us." The night before Tyler's departure, they held a small ceremony under the oak tree, adding a new plaque to the memorial they had created for Colonel Beauregard. The original plaque honored the Confederate officer who had hidden the treasure. The new one would commemorate the beginning of Tyler's adult journey and his commitment to using his education in service of others. To Tyler Hunter, Grace read from the inscription they had commissioned, who learned that the greatest treasures are found not in the ground, but in the courage to dig deep within ourselves and discover who we're meant to become. Tyler's first semester at Harvard brought both challenges and triumphs. The academic rigor was intense, but his unique background and practical experience set him apart from his classmates in positive ways. His professors were particularly impressed by his mature perspective on historical issues and his ability to connect theoretical concepts to real-world applications. "Your son is remarkable," his academic advisor, Professor Janet Collins, told Grace during a parents' weekend phone call. "He has the intellectual capacity for advanced research, but more importantly, he has the emotional intelligence to understand the human impact of historical events." Tyler's roommate, Marcus Chen, came from a wealthy San Francisco family, but had never encountered someone with Tyler's combination of resources and groundedness. The friendship that developed between them proved beneficial for both young men, with Tyler helping Marcus appreciate the value of service work, while Marcus introduced Tyler to urban culture and international perspectives he had missed growing up in Louisiana. "Tyler's different from the other rich kids here," Marcus told his parents during a call home. "He actually cares about using his money to help people, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty doing the work himself." Back in Louisiana, Caleb threw himself into his graduate studies with the same intensity he had once brought to military service and home renovation. His professors quickly recognized his unique perspective and practical experience, often calling on him to provide real-world context for theoretical discussions about preservation methodology and community engagement. His thesis project focused on developing sustainable models for community-based historical preservation in rural areas, using the Hunter Family Foundation's work as primary case studies. The research required extensive travel throughout the Gulf Coast region, documenting successful and unsuccessful preservation efforts, while identifying factors that contributed to long-term sustainability. "What makes your foundation different," explained Dr. Rebecca Santos, his thesis advisor, "is that you approach preservation as community development rather than museum curation. You're not just saving buildings, you're saving communities." The observation captured something essential about their approach that Caleb had never articulated clearly. Their wealth had given them the resources to think beyond immediate needs and consider long-term impact on entire communities rather than individual beneficiaries. Grace's career continued to flourish as her expertise in treasure discovery and archaeological methodology brought consulting opportunities from around the world. She worked with governments, universities, and private organizations on projects ranging from underwater archaeology in the Caribbean to artifact recovery in war-torn regions of the Middle East. Her second book, focusing on the ethical and legal challenges of treasure recovery, became required reading in archaeology programs across the country. The work established her as a leading voice in debates about cultural patrimony, indigenous rights, and the responsibilities of those who discover historically significant artifacts. Grace has become the conscience of our field, Dr. Martinez told a conference audience, where Grace was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. She reminds us that archaeology is not about finding treasure, but about finding truth and ensuring that truth serves justice. The recognition brought Grace invitations to serve on international committees and advisory boards, opportunities that allowed her to influence policy and practice on a global scale. However, she was careful to maintain her connection to Louisiana and the community work that had become central to her identity. During Tyler's sophomore year, the family faced an unexpected crisis when Hurricane Delilah, a Category 4 storm, threatened the Louisiana coast with devastating force. The hurricane's projected path would take it directly over their swamp property and potentially affect several of their foundation projects throughout the region. "We need to evacuate," Sarah Chen told them during an emergency security briefing. "This storm is going to be catastrophic, and your property is directly in the impact zone." The decision to leave their sanctuary was agonizing, particularly for Caleb, who had invested so much of himself in creating their refuge. But with Tyler safe at Harvard and Grace's support, he accepted the necessity of protecting their lives over their property. They spent the storm week in a hotel in Dallas, watching news coverage of the destruction along the Louisiana coast with growing anxiety. When the hurricane finally passed and they were able to return, they discovered that their swamp property had suffered significant damage, but had survived largely intact thanks to the storm preparations Caleb had insisted on implementing years earlier. "The old oak tree is still standing," Tyler said with relief when they called him with their damage assessment. "That means the most important part survived." The hurricane's aftermath provided the Hunter Family Foundation with its greatest test and most significant opportunity. Hundreds of families throughout the region had lost homes, businesses, and livelihoods to the storm, creating an immediate need for emergency assistance and long-term recovery support. Working with FEMA, the Red Cross, and local organizations, the foundation mobilized resources for both immediate relief and sustainable rebuilding efforts. They provided temporary housing, emergency funds, and most importantly, support for small businesses and community organizations trying to rebuild stronger than before. "This is what we trained for," Caleb told Grace, as they coordinated relief efforts from a temporary command center in Baton Rouge. "Everything we've learned about community development and historical preservation applies to helping people rebuild their lives." The hurricane recovery work brought new recognition to the foundation and attracted additional major donors who were impressed by their efficiency and community-focused approach. By the end of the recovery period, their annual budget had tripled, allowing them to expand their permanent staff and take on larger, more ambitious projects. Tyler returned home for Christmas break to find his family exhausted but energized by their hurricane response work. The experience had reinforced their commitment to their mission, while proving that their approach could scale up to meet major crises. "You guys are like superheroes," he told them during Christmas dinner at their New Orleans home. "But instead of fighting crime, you fight poverty and ignorance and despair." "That's exactly what we're fighting," Grace agreed. "And the best part is that everyone can be a superhero in this battle. It just takes courage and compassion." As Tyler prepared to return to Harvard for his spring semester, he announced a decision that would reshape his academic focus and future plans. After working with hurricane victims and seeing the foundation's impact firsthand, he had decided to add a double major in public policy to complement his history and archaeology studies. "I want to understand how to create systemic change," he explained to his parents. "Finding artifacts and preserving historical sites is important, but I also want to help create policies that prevent communities from being vulnerable to disasters in the first place." The decision meant additional coursework and potentially an extra semester at Harvard, but Tyler was determined to prepare himself for maximum impact in whatever career path he ultimately chose. His professors supported the decision, noting that his unique background and practical experience would bring valuable perspectives to policy studies. "Tyler represents the best of his generation," Professor Collins told Grace during another conversation. "He has the intellectual tools for complex analysis, but more importantly, he has the moral compass to use those tools in service of others." As spring arrived in Louisiana, the family began planning for Tyler's summer return and the continuation of their work together. The hurricane recovery efforts had revealed new opportunities for the foundation, including potential partnerships with federal agencies and international development organizations impressed by their community-based approach. "We're at a crossroads," Caleb observed during one of their strategic planning sessions. "We can continue growing and take on bigger challenges, or we can stay focused on Louisiana and do deeper work in our home region." The discussion continued over several weeks, with input from Tyler during his spring break visit and consultation with foundation staff and board members. Ultimately, they decided to pursue a hybrid approach, maintaining their Louisiana focus while selectively taking on projects in other regions that could serve as models for replication. "Our strength is that we understand communities because we are part of a community," Grace summarized their decision. "We can share that knowledge with others, but we need to stay rooted in the place that made us who we are." Tyler's junior year brought new challenges and opportunities as he began conducting independent research for his senior thesis. His project would examine the intersection of historical preservation and disaster resilience, using case studies from Hurricane Delilah recovery efforts to develop recommendations for policymakers. The research required extensive field work throughout Louisiana and neighboring states, documenting how different communities had approached rebuilding efforts and identifying factors that contributed to successful recovery. Tyler spent his summer break interviewing community leaders, analyzing economic data, and developing relationships with policymakers at state and federal levels. "Your son is doing graduate-level work," Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, his thesis advisor, told Grace during a campus visit. "His combination of academic rigor and practical experience is producing insights that could influence national disaster recovery policy." The recognition was gratifying, but more important to Tyler was the knowledge that his work was contributing to better outcomes for communities facing future challenges. He had inherited his parents' commitment to using their advantages in service of others, but he was developing his own approach to creating change through research and policy advocacy. As Tyler entered his senior year, the family began discussing his post-graduation plans. Graduate school seemed likely, but the question was whether he should pursue a PhD in history, a law degree focused on public policy, or possibly both through a joint program. "Whatever you choose," Caleb told his son during one of their weekly phone calls, "make sure it's something that will let you sleep peacefully at night, knowing you're using your gifts to make the world better." "That's the same advice you've been giving me since I was 11, Tyler replied with a laugh. "And it's still the best guidance I've ever received." And on quiet evenings, when the mist rises from the water and the ancient oak tree stands guard over their home, the Hunter family still sometimes talks about that morning when a rusted iron trapdoor opened to reveal not just Confederate gold, but the beginning of the life they were always meant to live together. But now they also talk about all the adventures that followed, all the lives they've touched through their foundation work, Tyler's academic achievements and future plans, and all the dreams that are yet to be discovered by people brave enough to take chances on love, hope, and the possibility that sometimes the most extraordinary treasures are waiting in the most ordinary places. Their story had become more than a tale of discovered treasure. It had become a testament to the power of family, education, and service to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities committed to building better futures for the next generation.